it be? That's fine. As I said, 4,000 characters, which is roughly around 500 words. It's like a page, an A4 page. And when do you have to submit it? For medicine and dentistry, 15th of October is your deadline. You want to get it done earlier. Make sure that you've checked with your college or your school what their deadline is, because they often have a deadline that is a little bit earlier than the UCAS deadline. Why is it so important? Again, please use the chat function or feel free to unmute. I'd like to keep it interactive. Why do you guys think they make you do this? And why is it important? I can see the chat, so if you want to use that chat, even like a couple of words. Yeah. So to distinguish between others, show your passion for the subject. It's the only, I completely agree, and I quite like that. It's the only part of the personal part of the process. So, you know, everything else, especially with medicine and dentistry, you've got your grades, your UCAT, they're all numbers. And this is the only thing that talks about you as a person and all the hard work you've put in to get that work experience, to do those extracurriculars, your hobbies, your interests. Yes, to allow the universities to know that you're passionate about the course. It's the only way they can get to know your personality. They want to see if you're going to add to their university, see if that you've got a clear goal. Everyone's got the grades, exactly. Everyone is going to meet the academic requirements if they're applying, but your personal statement is what's setting you apart. Eva, I think you've got your hand up. Is that a question? Was it an accident? Okay, that's fine. Yeah, really nice answers. Thanks, guys. So, the way that it's used differs based off of what uni is using it. So some universities don't look at it at all. For example, Plymouth don't look at your personal statement at all when assessing you. They check whether you meet the entry requirements. They then put their entire decision on the interview and the answers that you give then. They don't look at it at any point during that process. Other universities do look at it. So some universities actually don't look at it and then give you another extracurricular form to fill in. For example, Manchester, you'll apply to them and then they'll give you another form and they'll use that in replacement of the personal statement. But majority of universities do use your personal statement to assess you. That's okay. Okay. So how are we structuring this? You've probably had like a lot of people telling you different things, or we've probably had some sort of session in like your school or your college saying, these are the paragraphs, this is how they're structured. Has anyone got any idea how they would structure their personal statement? Or to those of you writing it, how are you structuring it right now? Introduction, work experience, volunteer work, extracurricular. So yeah, this is the classic structuring format of your personal statement. You have an intro where in like 2 sentences, you're saying, this is what I want to do and this is why. Then you've got some paragraphs about work experience, your volunteering, your extracurricular, your hobbies, your interests, sort of thrown at the end. Yeah, so everybody's got a very similar method of structuring it. There is actually no guideline. So this method just sort of comes from experience and people writing it and saying, this, we feel that this is the best structure. There is no like set guidance on from UCAS or like medical schools on how they want it. What they do want is obviously it to be unique, personal and honest and true to you. So this is our structure and it's very similar to what you guys have said already. You want a brief introduction, you want to get straight to the point. Why do you want to study medicine or dentistry? And then you want to talk about your work experience, your volunteering, your extracurriculars, wider reading, your jobs, your leading your sports teams, your clubs. Then you want to reflect on your skills and how you've gathered these, and then you want to conclude. my biggest tip for this structure is make sure that your introduction and your conclusion relate back to each other. So you want to end in a similar way that you started. So your introduction should get straight to the point. This is why I want to do what I want to do. This is why I'm passionate about it. And your conclusion should basically finish that off and summarize that. Since it's the last year of personal statements, would uni treat this year's cohort more considerately, be nicer to us? To be honest, I think they're not going to stray from how they assess your personal statements. So if they normally look at it holistically with everything else. I assume they would look at it in the same way. I don't think they'd have a particular bias in any direction. So I've already asked you this question, and it seems like a lot of people here have started. Has anyone not started? Because if you haven't, I'd like to motivate you to start. Okay, I think one person put their hand up. Yeah, a couple of people haven't started. Okay, wonderful. Thanks, guys. So how do you start? This is probably the most difficult thing. I remember when I was starting, we had a session about personal statements, and they then said, literally one lecture later, they said, everybody go write something. And we were on the computers, sort of really like, where do I start? What do I even write? And I don't have anything. Like, I don't know where to go. Honestly, I was staring at a blank page on Word, just looking at it like, where do I even start? And so personally, what I did is I thought, this is a bit of a joke. I'm just going to start, and I'm actually going to I did a mock personal statement. So I thought, okay, well, if what they're looking for, the examples they had given us of how to link like your extracurriculars to skills, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do a joke personal statement. And this is a true story. I literally wrote my first draft was a complete joke. It was over exaggerated, and I had written things that if I had submitted, I wouldn't get in. It was completely unstructured, and I just had like a page of a mock personal statement. And actually, that was still something. So eventually, that is what I used to then get the draft that I actually submitted. So how does that happen? You could start nowhere and literally just write and have a draft and develop that draft. But I think what you need to do is a bit of both. And I think a little bit of planning goes a really long way. So when you sit down to start, plan and think about these things. What have I done academically? What have I done socially? What are my skills? So you want to write these down and think, okay, every single extracurricular or part-time work or full-time work or work experience volunteering I have ever done, make a list. Anything academic, anything you've won, any awards you've won, anything social, anything like that, make a list. You then want to talk about your key skills. So what skills do I have? I thought in my head, I was like, okay, communication, that's one of my skills. Empathy, that's another one of my skills. How do I link this into my personal statement? I want these two things to be at the forefront of my personal statement. And I wrote them down. And then why do you want to do medicine? You've actually got to think very deeply about this, and be like, what is that? Those series of events. It's not necessarily one thing. What's the series of events that led me to want to do medicine or dentistry or this course? Like, why am I so passionate about it? Why, if I didn't get in, why would I be upset? What is it about the course that makes me want to do it? And write that down. And then you want to talk about what actually not only triggered your interest, but what built your interest. What is it? Maybe you started being interested because of something else, and now your interest has been tamed because of something else. And you can be really honest here. And oftentimes people do talk about the struggles that they faced in a hospital setting, on placement, or in work experience. And that actually has been what's maintained their interest. So, if you thought medicine was going to be really easy and then you went did work experience and you found out that's not the case, but that's inspired you to actually do medicine, that's wonderful. You can talk about that. So just a couple of things to think about. I'm going to stop there and answer some questions. So yeah, if you do have any, please do keep them coming. The personal statements, this being the last year of personal statements, I haven't actually come across this as yet. So I'm not sure if that's the case. I see that someone has shared a link, so you guys can read more about that. Is having virtual work experience enough, or do you need in-person work for experience for dentistry? Okay, I think this is a really good question that I'm going to answer at the end because it links on to personal statements. Okay. Is it okay to incorporate reflection on skills when you're talking about work / jobs, skills you've learned, rather than having a separate paragraph about it? That's exactly, I think that's a really sophisticated way to write, actually, rather than having a whole paragraph saying, I have done work experience, and then saying, these are my skills. What you actually want to do, what I'm going to show you next, is a structure that allows you to do that. What you want to do is have your experience and then the skill that you learned from it, and then the reflection all in the same kind of paragraph. Okay. Is it okay to mention observing a surgery for an undergrad personal statement? Yes, absolutely. I did a prosection class, and I was 16 at the time that I did that, so I still mentioned that, and it was okay. Do you think it matters what university we study medicine at? Okay. This is separate from the topic of personal statements, so I'm going to brush through it very quickly, but the degree of medicine is the same everywhere in terms of what you qualify with. Obviously, certain universities and places offer you certain advantages and certain opportunities, and then again, you want to be at a place that you're going to enjoy the structure of, but the quality of the degree is not different. Should you mention your A-levels? You could talk about your A-levels, but if you've got a lot more going on, I don't think I mentioned my A-levels at all. I think I mentioned biology once. So that is something you can do. But if you think, actually, for me, I've got a lot more to talk about, that's completely okay as well. The structure for early entry, the personal statement structure is the same anywhere. Is there any other work experience I could use for medicine aside for volunteering in a care home? You can use absolutely any experience. So let's talk about experience, because I think a lot of people are worried about the quality of experience, and like how to use experience in your personal statement. We'll get to that. So before we move on to the introduction, you guys have kind of jumped the gun to the work experience bit. So I'm just reading the questions. Okay. You can talk about any experience in your personal statement as long as you have reflected on it and given your skills that you learned from it. So as long as you're saying, okay, let's take a retail example. So you might say, I worked for a year in Primark, and that work that you did in Primark is completely irrelevant to healthcare. Fine. But what did you gain from it? You got a lot of communication skills, and you gained a lot of patience, because you're then wanting to talk about that particular encounter you had with a particular customer where something went wrong, and you dealt with it with a lot of patience. You then saw something happen, you had an issue with a colleague, or whatever you dealt with on a daily basis, you had to show a lot of empathy through that. So ultimately, these experiences that you're having in the real world are teaching you skills that are then definitely something you should talk about in your personal statement, because as long as you're relating that to how that's going to help you to do medicine, that's okay. Okay, I will come back to the questions. So let's look at the introduction. So how are we starting? I want you guys to read this introduction. I'll read it to you as well. And then in the chat, just tell me what you think. And be really honest. If you think it's rubbish, tell me it's rubbish and tell me why. So they've written, my initial interest in medicine stemmed from my excitement of human biology. Each time I reflect upon the sheer complexity and seemingly impossible intricacy of the human body, I feel awestruck. It seems incomprehensible that during each cell division, a 30-book set of Encyclopedia Britannica's worth of information is copied. What's equally fascinating is how doctors are able to fix the complexities of the human body. What do we think? Too many complex words. There's too many big words. It's hard to understand. It isn't personal. Doesn't say why they want to do it. Yeah. It's good they've mentioned what stemmed their interest, but it seems too exaggerated. It's a bit much. Not very personal. It's generalized, exaggerated. I don't understand what half of that means. And they do sound like they're wasting their characters, actually. Yes, I'm going to be really honest with you. I completely agree with all of these. I started reading this and I sort of got lost. So from reading that introduction, we gained absolutely nothing about the person. We gained absolutely nothing about their interest in medicine. That first sentence told me that they like human biology. After that, they're not talking about themselves anymore. It's not a personal statement. It's almost like an essay about biology. And I completely agree. It's too many big words, and they are becoming redundant. So when you use too many words that are the same, it's redundant. There's no point. So saying the sheer complexity when you could say that in one word is waste of characters. Yeah, I think the only thing that I find interesting about this is the comparison that they've done to how much information is being copied in each cell division. But I think that effect could have been achieved in far less words, more clearly, and in a more personal way. So this one's very similar. I think it's the same. Yeah, so that's the same. So yes, essentially, showing you that example because it's really important to think about your vocabulary. You need to have good grammar and good vocabulary. So you don't want to use words that you might use in a conversation with your friend, but you can do that. You can be eloquent by being simple and clear. Just because you've got a large variety of words used doesn't mean it's going to sound better. And I think this is a really big myth that I kind of want to get rid of is, oh, an academic is reading my personal statement. It has to have lots of technical language and sound very fancy. It does not. It's got to be clear, concise, and to the point. And actually, people will find it easier to read if it is like that. So yeah, there is ways that we could improve this. If you guys had this and you had to mark this for someone, give them some advice, how would you improve this? Let's say just this sentence that what they're trying to say here. They're trying to say, it's fascinating how doctors are able to fix the complexities of the human body. What would you add to this to give it some value in a personal statement? Yeah, could make it first person. Definitely add, it's a personal statement for a reason, right? So yeah, we want to add words like I from work experience. So you might say, working in a care home, I realized that, and it's really good if you, rather than generalizing, talk about one specific experience. So like someone said, attribute it to healthcare, talk about your work experience. So you could come from a place of saying, from my work experience in a care home, this particular patient that I saw, tell them how they were feeling, and then talk about the fact that actually the doctor came in and it was very fascinating that they were able to look at this patient holistically and fix how complex, fix what their issue was, even though it was very complex. And actually, in that way, you've talked about your work experience, you've talked about how you felt during that, and it's something memorable. It's a specific example, so it's not as general as this. Yeah, why is it fascinating? You could say how you feel inspired by their abilities, linked to the aim. talk about your personal attributes, use active words. I really like that. Can you give us an example of an active word you would use in that? Say how you feel you could contribute to healthcare. Exactly. Okay. So yeah, really good stuff, guys. Thank you. I think there are ways that we could fix this and improve this. And I think this is just a bit too general. And I think they're onto something. They've got something there. They have a point. They just need to add to this, make it more personal and make it more memorable. How could you improve on not just saying it's fascinating? Talking about why you think it's fascinating. So as a medical student, if someone writes something and I have to read a personal statement and it starts off by saying something like, the life of a medical student is very tough because they have very long working hours. However, it's really interesting because they get to see lots of patients. I already have lost them because I do that on daily. Like, I know that. So you're essentially describing to me what my job is. So if you can imagine that a doctor is reading this, you're describing to them that their job is fascinating. But they don't want to hear that because that's why they picked it. They're there for a reason. What they want to hear is why you think it's fascinating. So just by saying, I found it fascinating that so much was going on with this patient. You know, they had a fever and they were feeling cold and they were getting angry. Yet in medicine, we're able to put together all of these symptoms and solve that mystery. That automatically to me shows actually they've got a really good insight of what they're actually doing. And B, it does seem like they're fascinated rather than just saying, I think your job is fascinating. Because that's what these kind of sentences come across as. Does that help? So someone saying I mentioned that I understood struggles of being a doctor and how worthwhile it is to me. No, I completely agree. So the key bit on why that's a good sentence is because you're saying it's worthwhile to you. You're not just saying, I know that it's hard and it's fascinating and I want to do it. You're saying, I know that it's hard, but I'm willing to do it because these are my reasons. So you're convincing me that A, you understand it, and B, you have your reasons. So what I mean by when we have these kind of sentences on their own, they don't carry much weight. You need to make it more personal as to why you find it fascinating or why you think it's worthwhile, anything about yourself, and you're on the right tracks. So some more questions for you guys. Can you guys tell me why you actually want to do medicine or dentistry? Honestly, like, you know, not even in interview or personal statement terms, just very honestly in the chat, what is it that's interested you? Because it is hard and it's competitive and it takes time. So while you guys are hopefully writing some things in the chat, I'll just answer this question. Is it appropriate to mention personal, like your personal experiences, like being sick or having someone be sick? Absolutely. As long as you're doing it in the right way. So you absolutely can say, actually, this triggered my interest. And I learned more about it. As long as you're saying this triggered your interest and you went and learned more about it, that's very valid. And what you don't want to do is base your entire personal statement off of the fact that you had pneumonia as a child or you were sick as a child, someone else was sick. So definitely can talk about, I think I talked a lot about personal experiences. I mentioned it in my introduction and then summarized with it. But in the middle, I talked about why I then went and learned more about medicine. So my whole thing wasn't just about my personal experiences. I thought it was cool how all the organs fit inside the body. I still think it's cool how they fit inside the body and work together. The security, every day is different. You learn as you go. It's benefit to you in the daily life. And the money, yes. No, it's fine. It's a good motivator. Want to make a difference, constantly learn new things, not going to get bored. You're not going to get bored. So that's a really good reason there. I love how much there is to learn about science and human growth. I want to help people, and I love science and learning. Already in my position, reading these, it's really nice. It's really nice to see genuine interest. So can you see that you guys have written in the chat just very honestly your reasons? And I'm not thinking, oh, they don't know anything about it. I'm actually thinking these are really good, genuine, honest reasons, and they seem quite passionate. Experiencing times where things have gone wrong, wanting to improve, creating trust with people. I think that's really important. Okay, some personal experiences. That's lovely. Yeah, I like that. The emotional payback. Being able to help people and save lives. Work experience help, rewarding job. I love the detective part. Yeah, I think you've been watching some House. It's a single text. Oh wow, a single textbook. And these are really interesting. So if you guys also look in the chat, these are some really interesting reasons. And actually, you've not written them with any fancy words or like anything, with any sugarcoating. You guys have just sent these reasons to the chat, and they're valid. So if I saw this in a personal statement, I'd be like, wow, honest passion. Thank you so much for being so honest. So that is how you want to start your personal statement, with these reasons that you guys have. Okay, very quickly, what are the pros and cons? Because in your personal statement, you want to also mention your pros and cons. Okay, you want to say that actually I did work experience and I found that a con of medicine is that I might not have a lot of time to myself, but it's worthwhile to me because of X reason. So what do you guys think are the good and bad things? People will die, yes, there will be loss, and sometimes you aren't able to offer the help, or you do and people don't take it. It is, I would say it's mentally exhausting most times, very stressful, emotionally and physically hard, in the NHS at the moment. I think that's a very big hot topic at the moment. Seeing people in pain, people are rude, and you feel like you're not helping them. Satisfaction is motivate, yeah, absolutely. Yes, I think definitely the pressure of it all. I was in ED 2 days ago, and with a friend, and the junior doctor came to see us, and we had a conversation with her, and we basically got into a nice chat about medicine, and she got really emotional, and she basically said to us that she's not used to people being nice in the emergency department, and she just gets yelled at, and that, if you are on placement or you are doing work experience and you see something like that, that can be either a big motivator because you think, actually, I'm still going to make a difference, or that can be quite you think, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, if that's how it feels. So things like that are actually really good things to put in your personal statement and say, here's a moment where I realized it was going to be hard. This is what helped me overcome it. Long and irregular working hours, work-life balance, pay doesn't reflect the job, there's a lot of responsibility. Yeah. Okay, night shifts. Night shifts could be a pro or a con, depending on who you are. Okay, wonderful. So let's take some of your reasons from the chat. So I'm going to read one out, and I want everyone to basically say in the chat how they would make it better. So if my reason for doing medicine was, I'm going to take one that I really like. Okay, let's take this one. Educating people and improving the quality of their life. So if your reason to do medicine is that you want to educate people and improve their quality of life, how can you say this in a way that would look good or sound good in your personal statement, in a way that conveys a lot? So educating people and wanting to save lives. Try and put that in a sentence for me, or two sentences. And I promise just doing that with a very simple thing will give you a lot of practice. Nothing yet. I'll give you a minute and then I will share some ideas. You can pop some notes in as well. You don't have to give me like a fully formulated. Okay. Okay, let's try it. And if you're writing, please still write. Don't worry, my brain's not working. That's okay. I want to be in a position. Okay, there are some. I want to be in a position where I can educate people on their health and lifestyles whilst helping them at the same time. Yes. The ability to enrich others with how their lifestyle is right, and ways of improving the human experience. I'd like to encourage patients to positively engage with their health, motivate them to achieve personal goals. Brilliant. You guys are really good. Seeing how people's health has deteriorated makes you want to educate people on improving health so they can avoid this. And okay, yeah, really nice. So actually, you've said the same things in completely different ways. So I would highly recommend reading this chat as well if you're struggling, because you can see that everyone's got a different writing style, but it's effective. And you've said the same thing in a different way. Okay. So yeah, I love this. So I would start with something like this too and say, actually, I want to encourage patients to positively engage with their health, and motivate them to achieve personal goals. I really like that one, James. It's concise. So yeah, start there and then give an example. So how do I know that you know that? How did you discover that? Like, did you just sit there and decide, okay, I'm going to encourage people to engage positively with their health? What was it that made you realize that this is what you want to do? And that's the reason why. So add an example and say, actually, thank you. I was thinking of an example. Shadowed a GP. There you go. So when I was shadowing a GP, often when you shadow GPs, you see a lot of different health attitudes in a lot of different populations. So I think that's a brilliant example. You know, upon shadowing my GP, I saw a particular patient who was a smoker, and they had had a stroke, and the doctor was trying to talk to them about their smoking and how it's affected them. And you might want to cut this down, okay? But in that moment, I realized that actually I want to positively engage people in their health, etc., etc. So can you see how we got the example and we put it on the reasons for doing medicine, and you actually come up with a very reflective sentence? You then can reflect on that and say, in this case, it wasn't easy because the person had a very set health attitude. However, you know, I learned skills for the future. So even though the doctor never got them to stop smoking, they might have built a really good rapport. And they did that through their really good communication. Or you still felt like the patient went away trusting the doctor, okay? Or they were one step closer to having better health attitudes and a positive outcome. So whatever your reflection on that is, you might not have even achieved the goal, or the doctor might not have achieved the goal, but you learned something. In that moment, you realized, I want to educate people on their health. I want to help them take control of their health, and I want them to help them improve their lives. Okay. So how are we structuring our introduction? I'm going to try and speed up a little bit. It's important to, like I said, we're starting with why. Why do you want to do it? Then you want to focus on why medicine is a degree or a profession. So what drew you? What happened? And that could be, you know, that childhood experience. And then, so I had a very personal experience. I started with that. And then I said, actually, that's when I knew I wanted to do it. But then I went and did my research. I went to a prosection class. I looked at a human heart. I did A-level biology. you know, etc., etc. That's where all of your experiences and volunteering and all of that, even your A levels, come in. And then you say, this is when I realized that there's more to it. It doesn't just interest me. I want to educate others. I want to have a challenging career. I want to be learning for the rest of my life. Or, you know, I want the change, the everyday change. I want the reward aspect. Your writing style has to be gripping. So, you know, they are going to read so many personal statements. You need to be concise, and I cannot stress this enough. A concise sentence is so much better than a sentence with a lot of waffle, because people lose you when they're reading it. So you want to be concise and gripping. This is why I want to do it. I'm going to be really honest with you. You're going to write your first draft and it's going to have a lot of waffle. Then you'll take some out and you'll take more out. And eventually you're going to be writing in a way where you're going to think it's weird because you're missing out a lot of words. Normally we don't write like that. Okay, we add a lot of extra words. But eventually you'll have a draft where you'll think this is really concise and to the point. Okay. So for your introduction, write naturally. Don't use, my biggest, I think, tip is going to be, don't use Google encyclopedia or like a different word for this, because you don't know what all the words mean, and it looks artificial. Use the word that is in your head. Don't use synonyms. Try to write a short sentence which captures attention. Exactly. Go straight into it. Try to avoid, so a lot of people are saying, what's a good start? A good start is whatever your interest in medicine is. Try to avoid the cliche of, I've seen all sorts, like, I have wanted to do medicine since I was born. Literally, we saw an example statement and that was the opening. Or, you know, medicine, I was about to say one and then I realized I think it actually might have been my start. So I think I said something like medicine is the best career in the world or something along that lines. And thinking back, I think that is a bit cliche as well. So go into it, cut that out. You don't need something catchy. You just need to be yourself and be gripping. Try not to talk about academic achievements in the introduction. Absolutely. You don't want to come off as arrogant. So you don't want to go in with, I am the top achiever in A-level biology, and that's why I'm interested, and that's why I want to do medicine. Because immediately that person's going to put that down and think that's a lot of arrogance. You want to go in with, I love medicine. You need to give them the idea that you love medicine for whatever reason, or dentistry. And so you could write about why you're interested. You could write about why it interests you as a career. Okay, so you could immediately go in and say, having seen this, and it could be a placement experience. I am interested because I realized that leadership is a huge part of it, or, you know, knowledge, etc. You then want to think about what skills you need as a doctor. So whether you're doing medicine or dentistry, what skills do you need? You know, teamwork, competency, empathy, communication, all of these. This is important because once you've written these down, you need to think about, do you have these and how can you prove that? So this is where STAR comes in. It's very important that you don't just list skills and say, okay, a doctor needs to be good at empathy and good at communication. I'm just going to say, I am an empathetic individual. No, you want to show us. The challenge is you want to say that you're empathetic without saying the words, I am empathetic. Okay. And this is where STAR comes in. So, situation, task, action, result, reflection. For example, this is your situation. I'm a member, I'm the founding member of the school's debate club. Okay, that's your situation, from which I have learnt methods of critical thinking and respectful discourse, which may benefit my career in multidisciplinary meetings and case conferences. That's your action. We know now that this person has been in meetings and is therefore ready to do MDT. And because of their critical thinking, they think they're ready for presenting cases. Okay, fine. As a result, I find my time management skills very well defined. That's the result. I believe this will be useful in my career in medicine as I can prioritize tasks according to their degree of importance, which is crucial in a clinical environment. That's your reflection. So essentially what they're saying, and I'll give you a very simple example, is they're saying, this is what I have done. This was the result I got from it. This was the thing that I learned from it. And this is my reflection on how it's going to help me in medicine. So for example, I might say, I founded a Widening Access Society at my university. And as a result, I had to deal with a lot of resistance from a lot of people. And I had to put in a lot of organization to get things done, to get events done, to get people to join. And I led that with a lot of patience, and it took time. As a result, so that's my situation, my task, and my action. As a result, this is what I got from it. As a result, my communication skills have massively improved. And I've gotten really good at critical thinking because I can sort out problems in a very small amount of time. That's my result of what I've done. Your reflection then is, I think this will benefit me in the future, or in fact, just say, this will benefit me. This will benefit me in the future because communication is very important as a doctor, or because communication, having good communication with the patient ensures you can build your trust with them. So you're basically saying, I did this. This is the skill I got from it. Okay. And this is how I'm going to use that skill as a doctor. Okay. Reflection. The Gibbs reflective cycle is something I highly recommend you look at. It's something we still use at uni to write reflections. Very quickly, has anyone come across reflection? What is reflection? Why is it important? Why do we do it? In the meanwhile, I'll quickly answer the question. So can I say how I was an introverted person, but really improved my communication skills through group presentation? Absolutely. Universities love to see personal growth. They want to see that you weren't as good as something, you put the time in, you invested in yourself, and you got better. In my intro, I talk about one of my extracurriculars and how that made me realize I'd love to work in medicine. How can I link that to the conclusion? That's very specific to your personal statement. So you would basically want to, you'd want to go back to what was it, the key defining moment of that extracurricular, how that's going to impact your career. So like, let's say, it's knitting, manual dexterity got you interested in medicine. Why is that going to be good for you as a doctor? Can we say that one motivating factor behind our desire to study medicine was actually a negative encounter? Yes, absolutely. So without, obviously, you don't want to be rude and say, identifiable things, but you can very respectfully say, this happened, it was not a good experience, and actually this is why I want to do it better. I really do like how people do that, because I think it really shows growth and you're noticing things making a change. Okay, reflections. So coming back to reflections give you insight, what you get out of things. Yeah, shows you're a human with setbacks. Absolutely, it's important improving yourself. It can evaluate your abilities, it allows you to improve. Yeah, really good, guys. I really like everyone's responses to this. I think you've got a good grasp of what reflection is. So how do you use it in your personal statement? Honestly, look at this cycle and ask yourself questions. How was I feeling? So this might sound really like, do I have to go this deep for my personal statement? But actually, the more personal it is, the better. So how are you feeling when you saw that patient with the doctor you were shadowing? Or how are you feeling when that particular thing inspired you? And saying inspired is not as great as explaining how you were feeling to show that you were inspired. Evaluate yourself. What did you do really well, and what could you have done better? And how's that going to mean you're a better doctor in the future? Analyze the situation. What was actually going on in that situation, and then conclude and have an action plan. So this is really good for the people saying, can we use a negative experience? How are you feeling in that negative experience? What did you evaluate about maybe someone else? What could they have done better? What did they do well? What are you going to take away? So ultimately, that doctor might have just been really stressed that day, but I think it's really important that you don't let your stress get to your patient. For me, I have many ways of managing my stress. And so your action plan is that you're going to be a good doctor because you know the importance of always being kind to patients. So it can really be that simple. But reflection is a really good way for, especially people who are writing but don't know what to write anymore. You're kind of lost or you haven't started. Try picking one experience and just using the reflective cycle. How do you go this deep but concise at the same time? Write it all up and then cut. Take out words that you don't need. Literally, write it all up and then think, how can I make this sentence shorter and more clear? So I would say, don't be afraid to write. Don't write 500 words, 4,000 characters. Just write and then decide, okay, how am I going to make it more concise? So yeah, I think we've talked about some examples, so I'll move on. So in summary, I think make sure you reflect is a really, really big tip. Everybody can say, I did 2 weeks in a care home and this is what I saw. But not everybody can say, I did 2 weeks in a care home and this is what I learned from this particular patient. This is how it made me feel. And this is why I'm going to be a good doctor. Okay. That's what you're conveying, that you're different because you have learned something that will allow you to be a good clinician. Keep your introduction brief and enticing. Don't lie. Yeah, please. I've not mentioned this before, but you might get through to an interview by making up a scenario, but you could get asked about that. It's completely unethical. The career that you're wanting to do completely goes against like lying in a personal statement. Even if it's exaggeration, just don't do it. If you're plagiarizing, they've got a detector. If you're lying, it will come out in interview. It's just not worth it. You'd rather talk about experience that you don't think is relevant, but you talked about it well. Somebody's just asked to go back to this slide, so I'll let you look at that for a moment. Okay. I'm going to move on. Make sure you get feedback. Whilst I will say don't pass every single person your personal statement and say, okay, can you edit it, please? Because I think the more people that look at it, the more confusing it gets. I would say get lots of feedback from peers. They will look at it in a different way. Your teachers will look at it in a different way. Get a tutor and get a medic mind tutor. They will look at it in a completely different way, in a very personal way, break it down and tell you kind of what you can do better. Different people will pick up on different things. Some people will pick up on your reflection. Some people will pick up on things like your grammar and say, this could be better, or this is just not written very well. Start early. So it's okay if you haven't started, just start now. Do what I did and write a mock personal statement. Write it as if it's a joke and then fix it, change it. And do your research. So GMC Good Practice is a good place to find all like the skills that you need, etc. And it can be very inspiring if you read that and you think, oh, actually, this talks about good leadership and teamwork. I remember that personal experience I did where that's exactly what I saw. Okay. And the other thing that will help you do this is just literally making a list of everything you've ever done. These are some resources. So the Gibbs reflective cycle is very readily available. You can use Medic Mind's UCAS guide as well. And the GMC best practice that I just talked about is good as well. When I say research, somebody's asked what research. Research for personal statement, if you're going to talk about a particular article or a particular procedure or a particular book, make sure you know it inside out. And please join our personal statement bootcamp series. So these are every week, 6 to 7 p.m. So we've got one happening every Sunday. These are the topics that they're going to be talking about. And I would honestly highly recommend that you come to them. And I can just go back to the QR code that we had right at the beginning while I answer some questions for you guys to join the chat. And I'll do that within a couple of minutes because I'm really sorry. I know I'm over time. Right. So I've spent a year working as pharmacy dispenser in a community pharmacy where I've had direct contact with patients. It's quite different to a GP or hospital environment. Absolutely still relevant. If retail can be relevant, if something completely random can be relevant, it's relevant if you talk about it in a way where it relates to your skills being useful for medicine. When mentioning names of books, you need to give the authors' names as well. Or should you include names of places you've done your experience using up characters? I think it's good practice to say, this book by this person and this hospital that I did work experience at. If you find you're really struggling, I think place is something you can compromise on. But I with the book, I would like to mention the author. I'm just going to go back to see the questions. When writing about research you've done, how much of it should you cover? Whatever's you think is important. So what did you do? Did you write a paper? Did you write a poster? Did you present it somewhere? What did you learn from it? I would definitely focus on the reflection. Is it more important to reflect on attributes of a doctor or a medical student? As I've heard mixed things. Okay, that's an interesting one. I would talk about doctor. So I would reflect on the attributes of a doctor. I think medical students are they're students, so they're training, and I think the only time it's really good practice to say, oh, it sounds good, is when you're saying something like the organization I'm going to need. I believe, like towards the end, you can say something like, I think I'm ready to be a medical student because I have this level of organization or have this X and X skill. But I think when you're talking about the long term, that's better. So another thing I used to tell people is talk in your personal statement as if you believe that you're going to get in, without being arrogant. You want to say, when I am a doctor, I think my communication will be very useful, rather than saying, if I get in and if I get to be a doctor, this will be useful. A, it wastes characters, and two, you're confident that you're going to be a good doctor. You don't need to use technical terms at all. Keep it concise. If you're taking a gap here, should you mention what you're going to do or what you've done already? You can if it's relevant. And if you think what you've done is relevant and you've learned a lot from it, definitely. I would pick out the key things that shaped you. I'm really sorry, I don't have a link to the QR code. Maybe try it again. I crochet and I don't know how to add it to my personal statement. You can talk about manual dexterity, or just the concentration, the attention to detail, the fact that you've had to learn a new skill. How did you learn to crochet? It's quite an impressive skill. How did you get the time to do it? So, link to any skill, and you can put it in. Or the fact that it's a stress reliever for you. Can place names just be initials or full name? If it's a hospital, I'd go with name. In terms of care homes, I don't think you need names. Should extracurriculars be in one paragraph? They normally are towards the end. But if you think you want to distribute them and that's better structure, give it a go. Write 2 drafts and compare them. My biggest struggle is cutting down my statement. There's so much I've done with volunteering and extra activities. Do you pick a couple? Okay. I would pick the ones that you think you learnt most from and the most unique ones. The ones where you're like, actually, this is a really good experience. I know that's hard. So I would suggest you write all of them. And then you can even ask people and say, which one sounds most impressive? What you can then do is ask your tutor or your teacher to then put the rest in your reference, but pick the best ones for your personal statement. And you can write them as paragraphs and then pick the best paragraphs. You do want personal hobbies, yep. So try and make some space for them, even if it means you have to take something out. It can be very few characters. Virtual is still work experience. So as long as you learn something from it, absolutely talk about it. Does it matter when you've done it? No. I talked about my work experience from when I was 14 to all the point when I was 17 and I applied. So literally over all those years, every extracurricular and volunteering I had done, discussed it. And the recording will be on YouTube. How do you use sports? Last question. Put it in your extracurriculars, but make sure you've got a skill. Okay. So you're saying sports are you a leader of the team? Are you, is it showing good work-life balance? So that's how you're using things like sports and personal hobbies. Do you think saying I feel ready to be a doctor because of the skills I've developed in the conclusion is too cliche? I don't think so, as long as you do it in a way where you're not just generally saying that sentence, you're using everything you've talked about to say that specific things you've talked about to say that. How many characters over can you go? 0. It needs to fit or it physically won't submit. Okay, I'll stop there. I really, really hope that this was helpful to everyone. So thank you so much for listening and being so interactive as well. It really helps for everyone's learning. And yeah, good luck with your personal statements. Thanks, guys.